My ex-wife walked out 8 years ago, leaving me to raise our daughter alone. Now, she's back, demanding a second chance at family, and threatening to take my daughter if I refuse. I'm a 38-year-old guy, single dad to a teenage daughter. We've been on our own for about 8 years now, and I was just finishing up dinner with my daughter G when there was a knock at the door. It was late, maybe 8 or 9 p.m., and we weren't expecting anyone. I figured it was a neighbor or something. G went upstairs to do her homework while I answered it. But when I opened the door, I froze. Standing there, holding a toddler on her hip, was my ex-wife, S. I hadn't seen her in years. Honestly, I didn't think I ever would again. And I preferred it that way. The last time I saw her was during our divorce, and even then, she barely stuck around to sign the papers before taking off to God knows where. So, to see her standing there now, on my porch, with a kid that definitely wasn't mine, it was like someone threw a bucket of ice water on me. She smiled, that same smile that used to charm the hell out of me back in the day, and said, "Hey, can we talk?" Now, let me take you back a bit. Our marriage was, for lack of a better word, a disaster. We met when we were young, in our early 20s, and things moved fast. Too fast. We got married after a year of dating, and not long after, G was born. For a while, things were okay, or at least I thought they were. I worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, and S stayed home with G. But as the years went on, I started noticing changes in her. She became distant, constantly on her phone, going out with friends late at night. When I'd ask her about it, she'd brush me off or accuse me of being paranoid. Turns out, I wasn't paranoid. One night, I came home early from work and found her in our bed with another man. It wasn't just some random fling either. She'd been seeing this guy for months, behind my back, while I was working double shifts to support our family. When I confronted her, she didn't even apologize. She just packed her things and left. Left me. Left our daughter, just like that. She filed for divorce a few weeks later. She didn't fight for custody, didn't fight for anything, really. She wanted out, and I was left to pick up the pieces. G was only 9 at the time, and I had to sit her down and explain that her mom wasn't coming back. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Fast forward 8 years, and here she was again. But this time, she wasn't alone. She had a kid, a little boy who looked about 2 years old, clinging to her side. I couldn't say anything at first. I just stared at her, trying to make sense of what was happening. S, what are you doing here? I finally managed to get out. Her smile wavered, and she shifted the kid on her hip. I've been thinking a lot about things lately. About us. About GI. I made some mistakes. I let out a bitter laugh before I could stop myself. Mistakes? That's what you call cheating on me and abandoning your daughter? A mistake? She sighed, like she was the one who was tired of this conversation. Look, I know I messed up, but people change. I've changed. I want to make things right. For G, for us, we can be a family again. A family again? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. S, you walked out on us. You haven't tried to contact G in years. Now you just show up at my door with some other guy's kid talking about being a family again? She bit her lip, and for a moment, she looked genuinely remorseful. I didn't know how to reach out. I thought you wouldn't want to see me. But now, I'm ready. I want to be in G's life. And, well, this is my son, L. His dad isn't in the picture, and we've been struggling. I stared at the kid. L had big brown eyes, just like his mom, and he was clinging to her leg, like she was the only thing keeping him steady. It wasn't his fault his mom was a disaster, but that didn't make this any easier. And what? You think you can just waltz back in, like none of that ever happened? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm for the kid's sake. I know it's a lot, she said, shifting her weight. But I'm trying to fix things. I want G to meet her brother. I want us to be a family again. I made mistakes, but I've changed, I swear. Her words made me angrier by the second. She was acting like she was doing me some kind of favor by coming back, like we were supposed to be grateful that she'd graced us with her presence after all this time. I couldn't even look at her. Look, I said, rubbing my temples. G and I are doing fine without you. We don't need you coming in here, stirring up old wounds. You made your choice years ago. You left, and now you want to come back because things didn't work out with whoever else Dad is? Her face twisted in frustration. I'm not asking for much, just a second chance. I'm Elle's only parent, and I thought maybe, for his sake, you could. For his sake? I interrupted. What about G's sake? Did you ever stop to think about how she'd feel seeing you again after all these years? You think you can just show up with another kid and she'll welcome you back with open arms? S flinched, clearly not expecting me to push back this hard. I thought she might understand. Kids are resilient, you know. That's when I lost it. Kids are resilient? She cried for months when you left. She asked me every night when her mom was coming home, and I had to lie and tell her you'd be back soon because I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth, and now you think she'll just understand? She opened her mouth to, but I was done. I didn't want to hear any more of her excuses, her justifications, her attempts to rewrite history to make herself look like the victim. You need to leave. G and I don't need this. We don't need you. You made your decision years ago and we've moved on. She looked stunned like she hadn't expected me to slam the door, figuratively or literally, but I was done. I turned my back on her, started to close the door, and that's when she dropped the last bombshell. If you don't let me back into G's life, I'll fight for custody, she said, her voice cold and calculated. I stopped. Dead in my tracks, my hand gripping the door frame so hard my knuckles turned white. What? You heard me, she said, straightening up. I have a right to see my daughter, and if you're not willing to work with me, I'll take it to court. I'll make sure I get shared custody. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You can't be serious. You abandoned her. No judge in their right mind would give you custody. She smiled again, but this time it was colder, more dangerous. You'd be surprised what a good lawyer can do, and I've got one. So, are you really willing to risk it, or would you rather work something out like adults? I stood there, staring at the woman I once thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, the woman I had a child with, built a home with, and who destroyed it all in a matter of months, and now she was threatening to take my daughter away from me, the one person I'd sacrificed everything for, just because she wanted to play happy family again. I made my decision in that moment. Get off my property, I said, my voice low and steady. I don't care what you threaten me with. You're not getting back into G's life. You can try, but I'll fight you every step of the way, and trust me, I won't lose. For a moment, she just stood there, her face hardening as the reality of my words sank in. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and walked back to her car, her son trailing behind her. I watched as she buckled him into his car seat, got into the driver's seat, and drove away. I didn't move until her car disappeared down the street. When I finally closed the door, I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me like a ton of bricks. I leaned against the door for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. G came downstairs a few minutes later, looking concerned. "Who was at the door, Dad?" I forced a smile. "Nobody important, kiddo. Just someone trying to sell something." She shrugged and went back to her room, none the wiser to the emotional storm I had just gone through. I couldn't let her know what was really happening. At least, not yet. G had been through enough in her life without me dragging her into this mess again. That night, after G went to bed, I sat down on the couch and tried to think everything through. My ex-wife, the woman who had walked out on us, who hadn't spoken to G in years, was now threatening to fight for custody. And for what? To ease her own guilt? To feel like she could fix everything with a snap of her fingers? I didn't believe for a second that she actually wanted to be a mother again. Not really. The truth was, her life had fallen apart. Whether it was her relationship with Elle's dad, financial problems, or just loneliness. I didn't care. She wasn't coming back because she wanted to be a family. She was coming back because she had nowhere else to go. But the thought of going to court, of her somehow twisting things and making me out to be the bad guy, made my stomach turn. I'd always been there for G, through everything. I was the one who held her when she cried, who taught her to ride a bike, who stayed up late helping her with homework. But what if a judge didn't see it that way? What if, somehow, she convinced them she deserved another chance? I barely slept that night. The next day, I called a lawyer, just to be safe. I wasn't going to take any chances. I laid everything out for him. The abandonment, the lack of contact, the years of being completely absent. He listened carefully, nodding along, and then he said something that gave me a bit of hope. "You've been the primary caregiver for G for almost her entire life. That counts for a lot. If she hasn't been involved, and you can prove that, it will be extremely hard for her to get anything more than supervised visitation. But we'll prepare for anything." That was a relief. But I wasn't naive. I knew how these things could get messy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that S was up to something. I didn't know what her angle was, but I wasn't going to let her tear my life, or G's life, apart again. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. S started showing up more, lingering around the neighborhood. She'd knock on the door, sometimes alone, sometimes with Elle in tow, asking to talk or trying to catch G when she came home from school. But I never let her inside. I didn't trust her, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let her near G without a fight. Then came the rumors. I started hearing from family and friends that S was telling people I was the one keeping G from her. That I was a controlling, bitter ex-husband who wouldn't let her see her daughter. She spun this sob story about how she'd been working on herself, and how I was too angry to forgive her. Some people believed her, too. I got a few calls from extended family members, asking me why I was being so hard on her, why I wouldn't let her see G. "Are you kidding me?" I said to my cousin over the phone one night. "She hasn't bothered to contact G in years. Now she shows up out of the blue and expects us to welcome her back with open arms?" My cousin sighed. "I get it, man, but people change. Maybe she really wants to make things right. Or maybe she's just trying to clean up her mess because she's got another kid to worry about now." I snapped. "Look, I'm not going to let her manipulate me or G. She had her chance, and she blew it." By now the whole thing was eating me up inside. S was out there playing the victim, while I was just trying to protect my daughter from the woman who had abandoned her. And the worst part? G still didn't know any of this was happening. I couldn't bring myself to tell her yet. I knew it would break her heart all over again, and I wasn't ready to deal with that. But it didn't take long for S to force my hand. One afternoon I came home from work to find S waiting outside the house, talking to G. She'd caught her just as she was getting off the school bus. I parked the car and rushed up the driveway, my heart pounding in my chest. "What the hell are you doing?" I yelled as I approached. S turned to me, her expression cool and calm, like she hadn't just crossed a line. "I just wanted to talk to her. I have a right to see my daughter." G looked confused, her eyes darting between me and her mom. "Dad, what's going on? Why is Mom here?" My stomach dropped. This was exactly what I didn't want to happen. I didn't want G to get caught in the middle of this mess. But now it was too late. I had to tell her the truth. "G, go inside," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll explain everything later." She hesitated, glancing at her mom, but eventually nodded and went inside. As soon as she was out of earshot, I turned to S, my anger barely contained. "How dare you ambush her like that?" I hissed. "You have no right to be here and you know it." She folded her arms, her expression defiant. "I have every right. She's my daughter too. You can't keep her from me forever." "I'm not keeping her from you." I shot back. "You kept yourself from her. You're the one who left. You're the one who didn't call, didn't write, didn't show up for years. You don't get to waltz back in now and pretend like none of that matters." She flinched at that, but recovered quickly. "I've changed, I've grown up, and I want to be in her life now. You can't stop me." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "S, I don't care what you say. G doesn't need this. She doesn't need you coming in and out of her life whenever it's convenient for you. I'm not going to let you hurt her again." Her eyes narrowed and I could see the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "You think you're so perfect, don't you? You think you're better than me because you stayed. But you don't know what I've been through. You don't know how hard it was for me." I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. "Hard for you? You were the one who left. You made that choice and now you want me to feel sorry for you?" She opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't interested in hearing any more of her excuses. "Go," I said, my voice low but firm. "Go before I call the police." For a moment I thought she might argue, might make a scene right there on the front lawn. But then, with a huff, she turned and stormed off, her heels clicking against the pavement. I watched her leave, my heart pounding in my chest, and then I went inside to face G. She was sitting on the couch, looking down at her hands, her expression a mix of confusion and hurt. I sat down next to her, taking a deep breath. "Dad, why didn't you tell me Mom was back?" she asked, her voice small. I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to find the right words. "I didn't want to upset you, G. Your mom, she's complicated. She left us a long time ago and I didn't want you to get your hopes up." She was quiet for a long moment and then she looked up at me, her eyes filled with a kind of understanding that broke my heart. "I get it," she said softly. "I remember when she left. It hurt, but I'm okay now, I don't need her." I nodded, fighting back the emotion rising in my throat. "I know, kiddo, I just want to protect you, that's all." She gave me a small smile. "I know, Dad, and you have." In that moment, I realized something important. S might try to come back into our lives, she might stir up trouble, but G and I had something she couldn't take away. We had each other. And no matter what S did, no matter how hard she tried to manipulate or threaten, she couldn't break that bond. In the end, S didn't follow through with her custody threats. Whether she realized she didn't have a case or just decided it wasn't worth the fight, I don't know. But she stopped showing up and the rumors died down. Life went back to normal, or as normal as it could be after everything that happened. Looking back, I don't regret slamming that door in her face. It was the best decision I could have made for me and G. We didn't need S to be a family, we were already one. So if you ever find yourself facing someone who's trying to crawl back into your life after walking away, remember this. Sometimes the best thing you can do is close the door and move on. Oh, and if you enjoyed the story or just want to see more crazy drama unfold, hit that subscribe button. You never know what life's going to throw at you next.